Welcome. I'm Kimberly Williams, the CEO for Absorb Software. Thank you for joining us today to celebrate the United Nations International Day to Eliminate Racial Discrimination. Today, we will hear from executives who are people of color and have achieved the highest levels in business. As we hear their stories, I'm sure it will be inspirational to all of us. I'm now going to let each of the panelists do a quick introduction of themselves.
I'm Louisa Wee. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Assurian.
Ray?
Hello, everyone. I'm Ray Kelly, Vice President of Global Partnerships with Absorb Software.
Dalen?
Hello, everyone. My name is Dalen Winbush, and I'm the CIO at QuickBase.
Kelsey?
Hi, everyone. My name is Chelsea Redman. I'm an Associate Director at the Health Management Academy.
And Cedric?
Hi, everyone. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Lighters.
Great. Well, thank you, all of you. As we hear from these panelists, we have some questions that we've already curated for the event, but we also want to make sure that we take your questions as well. So if you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A box, and we will try to get to those as the program proceeds. So now I want to turn it over to Abdi, who will moderate our panel. Abdi is a vice president with Welsh Carson Anderson Stowe, a leading private equity firm. Abdi?
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say before we get started, I'm really honored and inspired to be a part of this and help moderate. And it's extremely successful in your all's careers, and it's inspiring to me personally. So thanks for doing this. So we'll start with a speed round. What is your best advice on how to grow your network early in your career? Maybe we start with Ray.
So my answer honestly would change, but part of growing my network, let's just say 20 years ago, was just about being courageous, finding commonalities with maybe leaders that I could see myself in, being courageous, just going up to them and having that conversation. Nowadays, I think that we would have to show up on social media. So social media, using that platform to connect the same way we used to do person to person, post content, share content, and grow your network that way. That would be my recommendation.
Thanks, Ray. Dalen?
Yeah, so just piggybacking off of what Ray just mentioned, it has been a different dynamic, especially after COVID, right? So we're not face-to-face any longer, so everything is more in that digital space. But I think one of the biggest things for me was just, not just only finding commonalities, but find differences. Have a very diverse network. So I'm in technology. Most of my network is not in technology. A lot of different verticals, business leaders, investors, just so that I can diversify the mind share. And then that helps me expand out and get outside of my own comfort zone. I'm a natural introvert, so I literally have to, pull up that yellow energy and force myself to engage with people. So that's what's helped me.
Thanks, Dalen. Louisa?
I actually agree with Dalen a lot. I think that, when I first entered into my career, I just felt so different than everybody else, right? Not dissimilar to probably what other women have experienced. You just walked into a room and you were the only woman in the room. And that plus being an immigrant, a minority, just made me feel so different. So I did have to seek out those that were more well represented to just see a very different opinion than my own. So I think that was really helpful. The other thing that I think was helpful is actually reaching out to people who are only a few years ahead of yourself. Often you get paired with a mentor who has forgotten what it's like to be earlier in their career because they're 20 years into it. But if you seek a mentor who's more in the 5-year range, you learn a lot. It's not one or the other, but in addition is what I would recommend.
Cedric?
Gosh, it's hard to follow all of the great comments, and I agree with all of them. I really like what Luisa just mentioned is, pay close attention to the years in front of you, because those also can be power partners for you as you grow your network. But I'm like Dellen in the same way as I'm an introvert, and so I always look for differences for whatever reason, my whole career, I always had more extroverted minds around me, and they really pulled me. So I feel like I'm an ambivert now between intro and extrovert because they pull me out of that comfort space so much that, you know, it's hard to even imagine me being an introvert. But I think that, and it changes over time as you grow your network. So a mentor today may be a sponsor tomorrow. So I think that's something else to keep in mind.
Love that. And last but not least, Chelsea.
Sure. I would say quality over quantity. So with Ray and all the other folks on the panel, I'm talking about how we're in this digital age and a lot of our networking is done online. I've seen some folks like really focusing on having like 500, 1,000 people in their network. But I think the difference is that do you know the actual people in your network? And I think having, spending time investing in the relationships, whether it's through coffee chats, like in-person sessions, and really having a person know like who you are and your background goes a longer way than having like a ton of people that you used to quote unquote know. So quality over quantity is my biggest recommendation.
Very well said. Great. Well, that concludes the speed round. And I think we can go into the first round of panel questions for everyone. Let's start with Ray. What role did your parents play in the leader you've become today? And how can one parent to best enable their child's professional success?
Oh, wow, Abdi. So that's a great question. So, and it's one that I'm excited to answer. So my parents came of age during a time when they had little to no control over their decisions. Most of the decisions for them and about them were being made on their behalf. So my father was born in 1919. My mother was born in 1935. So when they were in their 20s, they were living in an era where there were no civil rights, right? So my father was a veteran at a time in from World War II where he did not have any civil rights. So they took decision making for their controllables very seriously, right? Because they couldn't control what they couldn't control, but they could control getting an education. They could control showing up when it's your turn to show up when it matters. They could control hard work and having high integrity and being accountable because one bad decision could have lethal effects. So what that meant was inside of our household, it was a privilege. Like everything that happened to you was privilege based. Life might not look like you want it to look, but participating in it every single day was a privilege. They were really keen on early decision making and independence. So when we moved to Dallas, my parents at the time, Dallas wasn't integrated. So they had to work on the outskirts of Dallas. And what that meant was that they woke up very early. They had to leave the house and they left us in charge of each other. Like the siblings were in charge of each other. So we had to make decisions. We had to cook. We were latchkey kids. We had to leave the house and make sure we got back home early. And if we missed a step, like if we didn't put the bologna in the in the toaster oven at the exact time, then you were late for school. And then there were consequences for being late to school. What it taught us over time, Abdi, was accountability. And because my parents took the decisions that they could control very seriously, they passed that on to us. And it's created that fail fast mentality where we can also become agile. I think the one thing that parents could do to enable their children's success is to not shield them from being uncomfortable, right? Being uncomfortable is learning how to live in uncomfortable situations is the key to life. And it's part of who it is I look for when I'm building my own team. How good are you in uncomfortable situations? And do you have the ability to think critically? Because if you do, then we can go a long way far because success oftentimes is uncomfortable. And having that skill set is key to success. So that's what I learned from my parents. I love them.
That is incredible. Yeah, we need you to host a TED Talk or something, right? Dalen, did you have something to add to that, or no? Please name, or this one's for Cedric. Please name one or two people in your life outside of your parents or family members who've been instrumental in your leadership journey and why.
You know, I have to say, so every phase of my life, there's been someone that's been instrumental, but two people come to mind for me, and the first one was fresh out of college. I got my doctorate in pharmacy, and I was approached by, at the time, a director of pharmacy. His name is Jim McCava. Jim was from New York. And we were in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm originally from Jacksonville, Florida, and we were with a health system called St. Vincent's Healthcare. And the health system was looking for a pharmacist to help with establishing an emergency room pharmacy and work closely with the ED physicians in the practice setting. So Jim approached me fresh out of college and gave me this unique opportunity. He knew I was just a go-getter. I was eager to just roll up my sleeves and be an active participant and be an advocate for patients. And so Jim put me in this awkward situation where I'm in the center of an emergency room. No one's ever worked with a pharmacist. Plus, I'm a pharmacist of color, and most of the dynamics in the environment was people that didn't look like me. And so for us, it was a true test of, hey, how do we move the needle on being very active in diversifying what professionals look like in a career? So Jim first put me in the ED, then I joined the emergency room group. Then from there, the ED physicians, they fell in love with my partnership. And then from there, I went to the cardiovascular services. I joined the cardiology group. We're a center of excellence for cardiology. And I helped establish that center of excellence at St. Vincent's Healthcare. Then from there, Jim saw that I was very comfortable with being in uncomfortable situations like Ray just mentioned. And so then the health system bought another hospital. So I took the role of a director for that hospital system. And it was a 3-hospital health system. Jim retired. I ended up stepping into his shoes. Now, mind you, this is all within 5 years from me graduating from college. And then from there, because I took on that role, the rest of my career just took off. I mean, I got recruited to Norton Healthcare in Louisville, Kentucky. And then Norton Healthcare was building a new facility. So they asked me to help design and build this new facility for healthcare in the metro Louisville, Kentucky area. And then the second person was David Tam. David Tam was a physician by training, military physician. And he came to Louisville to review the state-of-the-art facility, Norton Healthcare. And David was the chief medical officer for a health system in San Diego called Palomar Health. And they were rebuilding a replacement facility for seismic anchoring in California because of earthquakes. And so David was Asian by background, and I had never worked with a CMO before, but he and Michael Covert recruited me to Palomar Health to help become an innovative thinker for the health system. It's the largest district health system in the state of California. And so then I came into that role. And then from there, I mean, my opportunities just blossomed. I mean, I met some phenomenal people, but I would say those people in my career, they took risks, they took chances, and they really were just my true, platform for me to spring off of and test ideas. Yes, there was a lot of fails, but what I learned real quick is fail fast and fail forward. And from there, everything else just really catapulted for me in my career.
Congrats. All right. Dalen, I'll ask the same of you. Can you share one or two people in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a great question. There's two people specifically in my life that have created these inflection points or helped me kind of bridge the gap within my career. Earlier on, I had a peer. Her name was Lori Kurkowski. It was at Nice Systems. And this was an inflection point for my career from a perspective of kind of being a team lead, still kind of an individual contributor, but still leading a technical team. And during that period of time in my life, in my career, I was very technical. Again, back to being very introverted, right? It's all about code. It's all about, heads down, not really interacting with a lot of people. But there was this point in time where Lori, she was the VP of customer success at Nice Systems. And her and I would have friendly banters and I would say professional arguments about what the customer's perception was of what value realization meant. And to me, it was binary, right? It was, yes, we deployed it. Yes, we fixed their problem. Yes, we were under budget. It was very binary. It was very, I was IT centric or technical centric. And she would always come to me talking about, no, it's about the customer. It's about their perception, right? And she had this quote called, their perception is your reality, right? And there would be these debates that we would go through for years. This was like at least 5 years we would go through these debates. And a light bulb came on when I got a bad survey with one of my teammates from a customer that we didn't deploy and meet their requirements. And they had some metrics that they were trying to measure after we deployed one of the systems, and we had a really big argument. But that was a realization for me that I truly understood that it doesn't matter, how well I think I executed, from a technical perspective, or my team did. It was truly about when you deliver, you're delivering something from a customer-centric perspective. So when that light bulb came on, I humbly went to her office. I really didn't want to tell her she was right and trying to adjust my thinking. And from that point on, she poured into me, helping me shape a voice for myself, have a voice for other people within my team, and really, driving more of that customer-centric mentality, how to empower teammates, make them accountable, multiply myself. I was very selfish. I wanted to take on the whole world. I didn't want to multiply myself. But when she told me you need to multiply yourself, I asked her, what does that mean? She said, you need to go from a team lead to actually being a manager and a leader. And from that point on, I was pursuing different paths to get into more of a senior leadership role. And once I got over that chasm, she still kept pouring into me books, podcasts. She forced me to do some speaking engagements, which I really disliked as an introvert. So even to this day, she's not at Nice Systems now. She's a senior SVP at Chase. I still tap into her probably once a quarter. We're always staying connected. She's always asking me about, what are the most important things in your role? What are the most important things for your team and the customer? And we're always getting back to those real foundational things. And I would say what I've learned from her, I'm passing on and letting the ladder down for other people as well. So definitely has helped me transition from being an individual contributor to a more senior leader. The last person, who was actually my manager at Ping Identity, he was the CPO, Chief Product Officer. He really helped me shape of being a leader. And again, another inflection point, be going from more being on the SLT to more of the senior executive side. And what he really showed me was, and I think said it, you said it as well, is being able to deliver something that's not perfect, but delivering at 100% commitment. 80% of it's going to be correct. 20% is always going to be continuous improvement. So what that showed me was you can never be perfect. You can't lead to be perfect. You can't expect your team to be perfect, but you do need to make commitments. You do need to build predictability inside of your business and be resilient and adapt. And what that did for me, what allowed me to actually move a little bit faster with velocity and show my team how to move faster with velocity and create an environment where you can fail fast. You have an environment of innovation, and innovation means you're going to throw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall and two things are going to stick. So that allowed me to, self-improve on myself, really have a high-performing team that was not scared to fail. And one of my last, I would say, takeaway that I learned from him, I'm kind of a geek and a nerd, but there's something called Zeno's paradox, and it's going from point A to point B, and you'll never get to point B because that's perfection. Take a small chunk, cut that in half, identify, okay, what's the next improvement opportunity, cut that next distance in half, and you keep on going infinitely, but you'll never get to B. But you can always find the most smallest improvement, and that really helped me out from that point on. That really catapulted me into more of senior executive roles.
Thanks so much, Dalen. There's probably a huge influx of Google searches for Zeno's paradox right now. So we're going to go into another speed round, if you all wouldn't mind. Same order as last time. I'll still call on folks. In your career, what was the greatest act of allyship shown to you? Ray, maybe we'll start with you.
So I would say the greatest act of allyship for me would have been when at one of my previous companies, I did experience some level of discrimination at work. And so this is what happened, right? Most people believe that just because you're an African American, you've always dealt with discrimination, like from the time you were in the womb until now. And that's not always the case, right? There are always undercurrents of discrimination, but nothing that had ever happened to me blatantly. But once I got further along in my career, I experienced it for the first time. So the first thing I had to do was get real with myself. Like, is this really happening? Is this really occurring? So you had to flesh out all the facts versus your feelings, right? And so, him leaving me off the agenda or her excluding me from opportunities, like, is this really taking place? Then the next thing I had to do was to validate to validate whether or not my facts raised to the level of any kind of real concern, right? And so I began to document and just kind of look over, is it really circumstantial evidence, or is there something really here, there, or there? And then nextly, I had to decide whether or not I was going to ring the alarm. And that in and of itself is very scary, right? So I went to my boss's boss, and it's this internal battle because there's a fear of being blackballed. And ultimately, it's a decision in measuring whether your fear of the power of influence and how it might come back on you is worth achieving your professional goals. Now, after I went through each of those steps and I decided to ring the alarm, here's where I'm answering your question. Change ultimately came because I had an ally. So there were people on my team that also were experiencing the uncomfortable nature of what was happening, not only to me, but also to them. And they began showing up unbeknownst to me on my behalf. So if the question is, what's the greatest act of allyship that I've ever experienced? It is when I show up to work, people show up with me, and my uncomfortable is their uncomfortable. And when we're all uncomfortable together, and after I rang the alarm on my behalf, they did it for me. And I could never be more grateful than inside of that situation, because it's definitely very scary. So that was me. That was my example.
Thank you, Ray. Powerful example. Dalen, go to you.
Yeah, so one of the greatest allyship shown to me was probably about 2 years ago at Comcast. And this one was more, the allyship was more partnership and locking arms and walking a journey together. And there's two journeys that this individual showed me from an allyship perspective. The first one was what I understood from him. He was very humble, and he wanted to have, it was more humbling acknowledgement. The acknowledgement was around, Dalen, do you have any obstacles that you face every day? How do you deal with microaggressions? How do you get your voice heard in a room when you feel like it's not heard? Do you feel seen when you're not seen? So the series of questions, and I was kind of put back a little bit because this was an individual that I would say was very boisterous about the saturation of the E&I conversations within the corporate setting. And so I felt a little put off on that, just trying to get really curious of why are you asking me all these questions? A couple months later, he comes back to me and says, you were an ally for me. You were a resource for me. You provided me with a lot of knowledge. I acknowledge that I had a problem. And so for, I'd probably say another year, him and I locked arms together, and he was saying basically to myself and to the rest of the organization, how can I help? And how can I be the face of I'd say, I wouldn't say the opposition, but the face of more of the white population of their organization, and stand in the gap for not only myself but for my teammates. So I thought that was a really bold move. And again, those journeys that we both went on was, he was acknowledging it. I was on my own journey to understand where he was coming from. He wanted to learn. He wanted more information. He wanted to, understand how he can be the best senior leader he could be by understanding. So we're resources for each other. And I believe that allyship isn't just one way. Allyship is bidirectional. You have to be a resource to unlock that potential for them to also stand the gap for you.
Well said. Thanks so much, Dalen. Lisa? That's the same.
It's hard to narrow it down. I think about one that was formative fairly early in my career, when I had made a transition from working at a management consulting firm where you are feeling like you can contribute from a strategy and analysis angle, and wondering whether you could grow a functional expertise and be an executive, right? And I worked very closely with the chief technology officer at eHarmony, who went on to have an amazing career and wasn't limited to just being CTO. He actually ended up being president of OpenTable. And in that work that I did with him, trying to describe machine learning in terms that non-technical folks can understand, so he could give his first couple thousand person keynote, he discovered something in me that was my ability to bridge a gap or translate from a technical audience to a broader business audience, right? And through that, I think he became such an advocate for me to take on bigger leadership roles, said really great things about me to the CEO and the president, and really opened doors that let me have a career in marketing. So that was amazing, right? And I try to pay it forward. And then I think more recently, because of the DEIB conversations, a lot of folks have come forward in wanting to understand, wanting to help. And I think that's different, right? So I think it's often times where people seek to learn, people seek to understand. And I've seen a lot of that in my current HR partners and resources here at Assurion that I think is great allyship, because we have a very large workforce that spans everything from hourly frontline to very senior executives. And, I think seeking out the different perspectives that I could offer has been, I think, not just representing myself, right, but representing that there are different points of view at this company.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Cedric, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, I guess as I was kind of thinking about the question, I would say it was my time frame at Novant Health, and Novant was they brought me in as a senior vice president for the pharmacy services for an integrated delivery network on the East Coast. And Tom Zwang was the chief medical officer. And really, the goal was twofold. It was one, to continue to grow our footprint within the health system and deliver phenomenal care. But the other one was also was to help the organization understand what it meant to have diverse culture and how that translated to patient care. And so, and Tom really was my true partner. Tom was a physician, chief medical officer for the health system, Carl Amato, the CEO. So the two of them really partnered with me to help push down the hierarchical nature that health systems can have when delivering care from a physician standpoint, nursing standpoint, and really brought us all to the table. And so, I mean, we did business retreats, we did strategic advances together, and really got on this drive. And this was well before COVID even hit. But our focus was really, if we can create a string or a stringless process where everyone understands that diversity matters, because the way that we identify with diversity helps us identify how best to take care of each individual person that comes through our doors. we really got on that wavelength, and I think it made a difference in the way we were delivering care. We saw it in our quality metrics and everything else. So I think a strong partner was Tom Dwayne, and that really brought a different mindset and brought me to the table, not necessarily just invited me to the table, but also made sure my voice was heard at the table in our executive meetings for our executive teams. And that made a big difference. And I took that, and also it helped me also raise up a lot of leaders within the health system. And I think it helped us be successful in a lot of our goals.
Thanks so much, Cedric. And Chelsea?
Sure. I appreciate everyone sharing. And I think for me, when it comes to allyship, I think of also times of sponsorship. So at my current organization, the Health Management Academy, I think I've been very privileged to have a lot of women and women of color as well, like in my corner. So being able to understand some of the struggles that they've gone through in order to help elevate me as a research leader within my firm, I think has been really helpful. So really it goes back to that first question about forming those like solid relationships in order to help not only push like your own career ambitions, but also to increase equity and equality within the workplace. So I think having those folks who are part of the decision makers and can make that case and continue to elevate your position and my position like within my firm, I think that has been really impactful and very eye-opening for me.
Thank you, Chelsea. We're going to jump into our second round of questions, and we're going to stick with you, Chelsea, on this one. First one. Could you share a time where your abilities were underestimated by others and how you?
Sure. So I think this is a very formative experience for me. So I know there are a lot of overachievers, like we're all overachievers on the line. But as a freshman in college, I was one of two Black people in my major, and I was actually not doing really well. It was put on academic probation. And I think these are some of the things that we don't talk about, like academic struggles and social struggles. Like you're 18, like what do you really know? And I think a key moment was one of my advisors said that like I would basically never do well. And I think taking that moment as someone who's very fresh, very green, like you're still working through so many emotions. And that was very formative for me in terms of really understanding my positioning and my power and what I needed to do. So not only did that mean working very hard, but also recognizing who I am and whose I am. So in terms of being able to work hard to have that positioning as like a future Black healthcare leader at the time. And I think like, moving forward, I obviously proved that person wrong, like got like undergrad, master's, and working on my doctorate part-time. But I think those experiences really help shape how you can move forward. And it's a part of our stories, and not forgetting how those early formative experiences still continue to push us forward. So even though, let's say now, like being challenged by certain situations in the workplace, always remembering that first moment, because if you can get through that, now with more experience, more allies, more resources, you can continue to push on.
Definitely prove them wrong. Thanks so much, Chelsea. Louisa, we'll go to you next on this one. What are one or two formative experiences during your career that helped to shape your career choices and or leadership style?
Great question. I actually hadn't thought about my early career in a very long time, so it's kind of fun to walk down and hopefully impart some useful information to folks on the webinar. Two experiences come to mind. One is, I would say a couple years into my career, pre-business school, just a very interesting time. I was a consultant in the telecom industry during a time where everybody was going under. It was the first bubble bursting, right? And, I think as somebody whose job it was to analyze the situation, just found myself in a situation where I didn't have the answers. My analysis showed something, but it didn't necessarily show a clear path to next steps or solutions. And I just sat with a client and was really honest with them to be like, listen, I've done all this work, but I don't think this is the full answer. I need your help. And in expressing that vulnerability, that opening up to be like, help me, let's do this together. Just came to a really good place with a client that I just had not experienced that type of collaboration. So it taught me something, right? It taught me that you don't need to have all the solutions yourself. You need to be able to ask for help and be vulnerable, and you will get to a better answer because of doing that. So I think that was pretty impactful. It's something that I still use to this day. And another one is related to my mom. My mom is a career woman. She just retired maybe about a couple years ago. By sort of a weird coincidence, she had me very young at 25, and I started working very young at 20. So when she was 45, which by the way is how old I am now, she was presented with a career opportunity to join a very high profile, well-known bank. And she had interviewed for the, call it head of the US position, right? And they loved her. They thought she was awesome. It's an Asian bank, and they loved her. But they said something really interesting, which is like, listen, we love you, but we really need to put a man in that top seat. Would you like to be the person who really does the job? And this place is like a little bit racist. I don't think they do it anymore, but it is an Asian institution where a ton of the leadership are not local. They had a floor in their headquarters where only men were invited. So a real gentleman's club. That's where all the executives had lunch. And she thought she was going to crack it, right? She thought she was going to be invited to that table. And that's what they offered her. And, she said the proverbial FU. And I thought that was brave. And I think that was really inspiring. And I think for that time frame, right? This is, 25 years ago. It was an incredibly brave move that I still refer to this day as, wow, I need to be brave too.
What a great story. Thanks so much, Lisa. Appreciate it. Dalen, we'll go to you on the next one here. Can you share an experience in life or your career where you underperformed or failed, and how you followed up on that event and how it shaped your thinking and work?
Yeah, so I want to be really transparent. This was a moment in my career really early on. I think it was my second or third leadership opportunity that I stepped into, and nobody ever wants to talk about being on a PIP, right? I was on a PIP. I stepped into a very large role that was more of an international team, stepping from being more localized, leading a technical team to international. And I think I took on way too much. I don't think I had the skill sets. I was put into this role I really don't even understand why I was put into the role. Maybe I was just very good technically, but I did not have a strong leadership acumen at that level. And I really tried to develop strategy to communicate effectively. And, and I started leaning back towards, what some of my other mentors back then really talked about. And I just took on way too much. So it took a long time for me to actually understand why was I on a PIP. I was underperforming. I was hurting the team, and I literally had to humble myself and take a step back. It reminds you, I'm still on the PIP, and I literally stepped down laterally and moved back into my previous position voluntarily. So it was more of the greater good of the business, put another leader in place, let me learn, let me sit back and understand where did I fail. And I think failure is probably the wrong word. It's more just a learning opportunity. And it really put me in an uncomfortable situation. Really wasn't afraid to lose my job, but I felt like I failed my team, myself, my family. And so I'd say a couple of years, probably about a year and a half, fast forward after that, where we didn't have any representation at all. I think I was the first minority leader at that level at this organization. And so I was actually asked to step back into a position that was 2 levels above where I previously was, into more of a director position. And I was prepared. I was ready. Just taking that time, just go sit on the bench, watch the game, learn the plays, learn what you did wrong, build that fitness, build that business acumen, that leadership acumen. And I was ready. I was ready to be put back in the game, and I crushed it. And I think the moral of the story is you may feel like you failed, yes, nobody likes to be put on a PIP. I think that's the only time in my whole career I've ever been put on a PIP performance plan. But it really humbled me. It really showed me the areas, the gaps that I have. I did not have any representation, so I was feeling like I was out on my own, but I still had tools in my tool belt from other mentors I had in my life. And so sometimes you have to move laterally, sometimes you have to step down for you to be able to have that pathway to move more vertically, right? So I just encourage people, if you have to take a lateral or step down, you just have to sit on the bench and learn some more. You're not off the team, and you just get back in the game.
Great. Hey, Abby, I'm going to jump in with one of the questions from the audience if I can. And Louise, I'll address this first part to you, and then I'm going to do a follow-up as this relates specifically to healthcare, at least in the United States, to Chelsea. So, Louisa, what do you see as the role of corporations in the fight for social equity, and how do you use your role to further that vision?
Well, that's definitely a marketing question, right? Listen, I think it sort of, from my vantage point as a person who's going to lead the outbound communications, this is actually an area I dig into before I join any company. It's authentically what is there, because the last thing I want to stand for is bullshit, right? Or not a real answer, not a truthful answer, or one where you're trying to be deceptive. So, to the extent that everybody can control it, I think you need to understand, where does the company stand on these issues and feel aligned to it? Now, assuming you get there, or there is alignment with what you think is the right way to address equity and inclusion and diversity, then I think the truth is both business partners and consumers will see through the bullshit, right? So you need to be transparent, real, authentic, and speak to it like you really mean it. So, what I would say is that authenticity is something that needs to come through. But I also realize that in many places, not everybody has that ability to be well aligned with what is actually the underlying core of what the company believes. So, my advice here is really align yourselves with the companies and the values that you think are what you want to see in the world. And then speak the truth, right? Do not do it in an angry way, because, that is always not great. But try to inspire people to express curiosity and seek to understand is the tack that I always try to make sure that my team puts out there.
Great. Thank you. Hey, Chelsea, I have a follow-up to you. I know that the Health Management Academy is very focused on improving medical outcomes. One of the big gaps that we have in the North, and at least in America, I can't speak to other countries, is that between, say, Blacks and Asians and then whites, there is a 10% or greater decrease in life expectancy for people that are Black or Asian compared to whites. Blacks have double the infant death rate as white babies. This has to play into some of the things that you work on or that your organization works on to improve overall health outcomes. I'm just wondering if there's anything specific that your organization works on to try to close that gap specifically.
Sure, not a problem. So I think as we all were aware in 2020 with the social unrest, especially like with George Floyd's murder, a lot of health systems did come together and recognizing that we need to take steps really to not move from equality. So not just, giving people the same, but towards equity. So being able to have further investments in certain populations, oftentimes minoritized populations and vulnerable populations that have been underserved with some of the examples that Kimberly gave. So here at the Health Management Academy, for reference, we work with the top 150 health systems across the country. And we do that through a number of ways, through research, through peer learning, and we formed the Health Equity Alliance. So the Health Equity Alliance is a group of 25 plus health systems and industry partners that are working together collectively to help solve some of these issues. So some of that is is through research, but then also through peer learning and sharing best practices. So we do that across a couple of our different work streams. So one of them, let's say, being maternal health. So we actually just had a maternal health roundtable a couple of weeks ago, really trying to get into moving beyond the statistics. Like, we know all the data is out there, but what are health systems doing to really have like solid interventions? Same thing goes with hypertension. 50% of adults in the US like have hypertension. We've been working on it forever. It's like not sexy per se, but like rates continue to go higher. So really delving into the why and getting to the how we can improve. So through innovative care models, through looking at data, and like with all the folks on the phone as well, and IT solutions. So I think there are a number of ways. So if anyone has any questions about it, I'm happy to talk more, but I think the Alliance is doing a lot of work to help bridge that gap within the industry.
Great. Cedric, I'm going to address the next one to you. What are ways that you take care of your own mental health when you may be the only person in the room that's a person of color?
I think so. First of all, when I step in the room, I don't think I recognize that anymore. I identify with it as a person of color, but I'm not sure that that's the top of mind for me when I step in the room. I think I'm more focused on what's my purpose in the room, and how is my voice going to be heard in any room or any setting that I step in. So I think that's the first piece. But the mental exercise, I guess I still focus on the 5 F's. And those the 5 F's are, faith. How do I always come back to my core center self? And I do that every morning. I'm one of those guys that's up way early in the morning, just really trying to, I like the quiet in the morning. So, and coming to my spiritual connection. Family, recognizing that anything that I do is centered around, what brings me joy, and that's my family, right? My financial well-being. How am I staying focused on the things that matter, not as money per se, but wealth and resources. Having the resources to do the things that I enjoy in life, and also support the people that I love in my life. And then, of course, fitness. How do I continue to stay fit, and it allows for me to not become that statistic that Chelsea's talking about with hypertension, diabetes, and so forth and so on, because it runs in my family. And then, most importantly, if I do all those 4 things right, I'm going to have fun. So anytime I walk in a room, I'm going to have fun, and I'm going to enjoy the people that I'm in the room with. Otherwise, why am I here? And so I'm always looking for ways to bring some energy, some drive to any situation that I'm part of. But I think those things, I'm always oscillating between those to figure out how can I balance those on a routine basis. Sometimes I do better than others, but those kind of keep me focused and keep me driven on a routine basis.
I think it's really interesting. One of the statistics that I always marvel about is when you look at women who hold C-suite positions in Fortune 500 companies, 94% of them were athletes. 52% played at the collegiate level. And I think, I was one of those that did play basketball at the collegiate level. And I think about some of the resilience and toughness that you get that competitive spirit, you get scrappy, and so I think one of the things that is just really helpful, and I think Ray alluded to it in her upbringing as well, teaching yourself resilient skills is really important in a lot of different ways. But I think, one of those for me is obviously being the only woman in the room. I think it really, that toughness really helped. It's not the only time that toughness helps. But I would say that it definitely is good for your mental health in a variety of ways to work on that resilience. And, you talked about, Cedric, too, like staying in good physical shape and so forth also is just a great way to do that. Okay, so another question. I'm going to take this one to Dalen, and it's a tough one, but what do you think it's going to take for there to be not have racial discrimination in the workplace?
Well, this is a tough one. This is a big one. I've thought about this with myself. I think, over the years, especially with some of the heightened awareness around some of our social distress. I mean, honestly, what we see in the workplace is a product of our society, right? So I think for us to take a step back, yes, we can, we can put some protocols in place from a enterprise perspective within your own business. You have ERG groups, you have all of these different systems to be able to, I would say, remediate or mitigate some of the discrimination pieces, even hiring practices, things like that. But I don't think we're ever going to be able to eradicate racism inside of a company. I think all these programs are great. It's moving in the right direction. But because it is a product and a mirror of our own society, cultures change within an organization. People leave, people come. You have joiners, movers, and leavers. And when people come from the outside and they join your organization, they're going to come with their own values. They're going to come with their own culture. And so it's always going to be a revolving door. Everybody has perceptions. They have their own biases, microaggressions. So it's just going to be a continuation until we actually understand from a society perspective that, how do you really bring in an inclusive society together? And that before you can even get to, diversity or equity, you got to build inclusion. That's not just voice. That's not just the color of your skin or men or women. So I truly believe that we can put all the effort towards it, but it's just going to be a continuous fight. So I don't have the right answer. I wish I did. Probably it's not going to happen in my lifetime, maybe my kid's lifetime. But it's a huge challenge. And I think we have a significant challenge here in the US. I think internationally there's different value systems, but in the US, we have our own challenges. And I don't think we've faced, I don't think we really faced history as from what it really is. And until we do that, we're going to keep fighting. So.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think I go back to something Louisa said earlier about picking a company maybe that is better at it. I mean, it's maybe not going to be perfect, but I certainly, one of the pieces of advice that I give women is, it's going to be really difficult to succeed in some companies. And so pick a company where you already know that, there's already some women in leadership, or women they've trusted to run a business unit or do something. And so it will be, I think, over time, I think when you think about attracting talent to an organization, if you eliminate half of the talent because they're women, and then you eliminate another group because they're minorities, and then you eliminate another group because they're, LGBT or something, you have a pretty small group of people that you're recruiting from, right? And so I think if over time, if people who bring a diversity to a workplace go to organizations that are more accepting, they're going to attract better talent and hopefully win in the marketplace. And maybe that will spur on, better diversity across all companies. Hard to know. Hey, Ray, I'm going to give you this one. How do you address or redirect white people in leadership who expect you as a Black leader to educate them on the Black experience? Do you take on the task? Do you feel responsible for educating them? How do you respond to that?
Ooh, that's a heavy one, Kimberly. So I think I just take on the task. I mean, I think Louisa said it best. Part of life and getting to the next level in life is just being transparent and real. And so I have had people ask me questions like, well, Ray, this was back when they were talking about the statutes and whether or not the statutes should come down in certain, parts of the South. And they were like, well, Ray, I just don't understand why it's such a big deal. I mean, after all the people were fighting for was states' rights. Like, what's the big deal? And I'm like, well, do you know what particular state's right it is that they're advocating for? And so there are questions like that where I kind of take them face on. And if we're going to get to a place where we are minimizing racial discrimination as much as possible, then Black people have to play their part in answering questions that might be uncomfortable. White people have to play their parts in listening and wanting to be educated. but we're all inside of this pod together, and we have to play our part. If you think about America as a nation, we won our independence in 1776, but it took close to 100 years for Black people to stop being slaves. Then it took close to another 100 years for those same subsets of people to gain freedom, right? And when you think about the exhaustion of civil rights and what it did, from there, people went into their own corners until Barack Obama brought in his campaign for presidency, brought it all up again. And now we're at a place in which we can have these kinds of conversations, Kimberly, that you talked about. So it's progress, and we're all in the spirit of progression. And personally, I don't shy away from it. I'm transparent and real without having a negative edge or angry, as Louisa stated. And so progress happens, and I'm not afraid to discuss it.
Yeah, thank you. Louisa, I'm going to ask you one more question, and I'm bringing this because you said that you were, I think, not born in America when you started one of your earlier responses. So I'm taking a leap of faith here. But if English is your second language, and maybe it was at one point in your career, what kind of challenges did you face, and how did you address that? And I will say that that's, for some people I know, a very real issue. I had my last company promoted somebody to the CFO position, and he was not born in the United States, and his English was, you could tell he wasn't born in the United States. And he said to me, "You're the only person in the world that would have ever given me this chance." There's an assumption that because you don't speak English, flawlessly, that you're not smart and that you're not good at your job. So it was sort of interesting. So I'm just curious from your perspective, if you've had that and any advice you have.
Yeah, I actually come from a very privileged story of immigration, right? My family's from Singapore, and we generally speak multiple languages. So English is a primary language. And if you're ethnically Chinese, you learn Mandarin in school. And then I spoke different dialects of Chinese at home. So I would say that maybe it wasn't my most native tongue at some earlier part of my life, but it certainly is now, because I can't say anything intelligent about voting or rights or taxes in Mandarin or any dialect of Chinese. But to your point, because I did come from that situation of not coming from this culture, it just made you really aware. I mean, there are a lot of books out there about being third culture. And that's, when you come from a culture, but you're raised in another, and you're also exposed to yet another, right? And it just gives you, I think, it's given me, and I've met a lot of other third culture adults. If you were raised as a third culture kid, where we have a lot of perspective and the ability to see from different people's shoes. And as a leader, when you see somebody who is really special in terms of their talent and their abilities, and this is their insecurity, there are lots of things that I have done myself as a coach, as a sponsor, as an ally. And there are also things that you can do that are out there, right? There are public speaking resources, classes. I have the luxury now of working at a large enterprise where I can ask my HR partners to help find a coach or a program, depending on who the individual is, to really help them with that. But I think the first is to help them see that it is, just like anything else in their career, something that they can get better at and they can learn from. And I think it's a subtle form of discrimination that happens in big countries, right? You could say US is not alone in that, but if you go to a place like a Germany or a UK, it's very similar. Interestingly, having worked a lot in Singapore in my life now, it's not like that in Singapore, because it is much more of a melting pot and people coming from all over the world. So help giving that perspective, like, hey, we're here to help. This is probably a bigger deal inside you than it is externally, but how can we help?
Great, thank you. I can't believe how fast an hour went. I want to thank you for joining us to celebrate the United Nations International Day to eliminate racial discriminations. The panelists were great, and I hope they provided you some ideas and some inspiration. Please join us on May 17th for our next Ally Chat. we have a panelist group who affiliate with LGBT plus in some way. And until next time, remember, each of us can be an ally to each other and make our companies a better, more inclusive environment. Thanks for joining.